Welcome back to another episode of NFT 365. And we are not only off and running in beautiful season 2 of the podcast, but we are also entering a new year, which maybe might mean that there is a new bull run in the future. I think many of us could just let's just hope that maybe 2023 has something good to offer us. I know if we would have rewinded a year ago, I don't think you would have given me 10 guesses to how I said the end of 2022 would have gone. For the NFT world, I don't think I would have got any of them correct, even with 10 guesses, as it's been a wild roller coaster in not only the market as a whole, but some of the the pluses and the minuses. And just in the last 7 days, we had Trump NFTs, we had Scottie Pippen drop NFTs on the day we're recording this, and then also at the same time we have SBF and the world of crypto that often impacts a little bit of everything that we're doing. But for this episode, excited to bring in not only a fellow podcaster, a fellow content creator, but someone that's been, I like to say, we're the kind of the unsung heroes of a lot of Web3, especially early adoption. Is that, for a lot of people, why do they stay involved in a space that is maybe chaotic or maybe full of change, maybe very disruptive? Probably most of your friends and family are confused by what the hell it is many of you are doing in Web3 and NFTs. And I like to say, us content creators are the ones that hopefully, keep you coming back, keep you excited, keep you motivated, and also just kind of provide fresh perspectives and hopefully, make you feel a little bit less alone. And so excited to have Jenny from the blockchain here as today's guest. I was on the podcast this weekend and got a lot of our listeners reaching out and saying, "Oh my goodness, two of my favorite podcasts." So excited, Jenny, to have you on here. Welcome to NFT 365. Excited to have you here.
Yeah, oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me on. And I was super excited to bring you on our show, NFT Catcher Pod. And yeah, a lot of our listeners were pumped that, we finally collabed on an episode together. So that was a lot of fun.
So
Always gotta, oh, go ahead.
No, yeah. So yeah, I love that piece of it. Didn't mean to jump in on you, but I've done a little research on your background. Watched a couple interviews that you've given recently. But for our audience that isn't as familiar with your background, talk to me a little bit about pre-Web3, and then kind of your entry point into Web3, and we'll kind of jump from there.
Pre-Web3. All right. So I don't know how far back to take it, but I'll try to be quick. Basically graduated college, got a bachelor's degree in psychology, didn't really know what to do after that, was kind of stuck, do I go into the psychology field? Do I do something else? Ended up starting a glitter business with my twin sister, Steph. Ran that for a couple years. Then basically decided to get more serious with the business and started going to a bunch of entrepreneur events, which I know you're from the entrepreneur world and you're a speaker and everything. So when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, I used to go to a ton of events and then just really fell in love with the scene of events and entrepreneur events and the energy and everything. And then started, basically ran the social for this US tour of events and then ended up speaking at them. And then after that kind of ended, what did I do after that? I got into TikTok. I grew to almost 700,000, or I think I was at 700,000 followers. I kind of forget, but made a living on TikTok, basically making funny beauty videos, and I would just do a lot of outreach to makeup brands and see if they wanted to sponsor videos and stuff, and then kind of got burnt out from that. Wasn't as passionate, just kind of quit cold turkey one day, just stopped making videos, and then discovered NBA Top Shot, got super early with that, one of the first couple thousand users. Then it started blowing up, started making content for Top Shot. I, after 2 weeks, became the most subscribed to Top Shot content creator, which really wasn't hard at the time. And next thing you know, Evaluate, which at the time their name was Evaluate Market, now we're Evaluate.xyz. They reached out. They're like, hey, do you want to work for us full time and help us, grow this? And I'm like, yeah. And the rest is kind of history. But yeah, it's just a bunch of, content creating in my past. And now I have a podcast, the NFT Catcher Podcast. We just reached 100 episodes, which is nothing
Woo-hoo.
on yours, but, we record like twice a week. So slowly but surely we got there. That
No,
was a lot of fun.
that's impressive. I mean, congrats on the 100 around that 100 episode. I don't any podcast that we talked about a little bit on your show, right? The average podcast dies after 7 episodes. Let's face it, in Web3, especially the Web3 NFT space, we've probably had 40 different times where most people would give up or had reasons to give up, or even valid reasons, right? And there were some big podcasts that I know paused over the summer and made some big announcements, including some YouTube shows that were just like, it takes a lot to create in this space. I love the background there. It's funny, a lot of people we've interviewed in this space, there's a psychology component, there's like a poker component, right? And there's and then there's like kind of like that finance component for a lot of them as well. And I fall into the poker side. I did that for a good while of my career in between cybersecurity and kind of the digital marketing world. But you mentioned like being a content creator, being burnt out, kind of dabbling in from psychology to fashion to Top Shots. I'm curious. Top Shot was my first aha as well. I was a little bit underwhelmed, weirdly enough, in the Top Shot piece because I've been a card collector, but I stopped that. When I was in college, I probably stopped buying cards, but I still hold, I have an entire storage unit that has a bunch of baseball cards, football cards, basketball cards in it. My daughters, always laugh because they've never really understood what the hell those were for. And so for me, Top Shot was like, if it was, I jokingly say, like, if Top Shot was about the NFL or NHL, I would have been in a lot of trouble because that's where most of my attention lies. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. So there's like the connection there. In Pittsburgh, growing up, we didn't have a NBA team. So like NBA was a sport I loved, but it wasn't kind of that connection. What about Top Shot kind of drew you in? What about like that, either that community? What was your kind of original entry point in the Top Shots?
So I also was a card collector. I lived with my aunt and uncle for a bit, and my uncle was super into collecting, and he had a bunch of cards, different sports, varying like football, basketball, had some hockey, had some baseball, and so he kind of got me and my sister into collecting cards. And I mean, I still have my card collection. It's not much, but yeah. So I used to be into collecting physical cards, and so I got into crypto in 2017 and learned a bunch about the tech and was super excited about it. Unfortunately, bought the top at the time and then just watched everything go down. So that wasn't that exciting. But when things started picking up again, that was exciting. But yeah, so 2020, October 2020. Basically, my sister remembered that she had crypto kitties, and back in 2017, yeah, she like made a wallet and everything, and basically she lost her password and her seed phrase, so she couldn't get back in. So she was on the Dapper website, just kind of like trying to figure out if there's anything she could do, and she stumbled upon, oh, we are starting our open beta of NBA Top Shot, and so we were one of the first people when they opened the beta up to join, and it just made a lot of sense to me because I was already into collecting physical cards, and so I was like, this is like collecting digital cards on the blockchain, like this is great. And I just thought it was super cool, and I quickly fell in love and became obsessed, and I was like going crazy buying packs, and I became just super passionate about it, and I was like, I need to share my passion, so I started making videos. But yeah, and I mean, even now I have over like 1,000 Top Shot moments, like almost 500 of them are like the series 1, and I'm just really into collecting them even now, even despite the bear market of Top Shot and everything that has happened. I think it'll come in waves. It might take some time, but yeah, I do like Top Shot and believe in it a lot. So Yeah,
Love
I don't
that.
know.
I love, and I'll tell you what, I got to, it was actually my first event post COVID. I got to speak at an event actually here in the DC area. And it was a panel, and it was the weirdest panel. I could probably show pictures and videos because we had these giant like glass partitions in between us because
Oh,
it was still kind of like post COVID. And
oh
like,
my God.
for whatever reason, like that's what we had. And I was on two panels. I was moderating a panel and I gave a keynote at this event. But one of my panels was actually with one of the founders from the NBA that kind of came up with the original idea of Top Shot. And I remember the conversation I was having with him was mostly around blockchain and creator coins, because the creator coin space is kind of one of the places that I kind of came into, and I launched my own coin at the time. And I remember like hearing his view, and like a lot of it coming out of the bubble for NBA, and a lot of like just the idea of like how do we reimagine some of the interaction with fans. And I remember like that's when I realized like my view of Top Shots was wrong. Was like, oh wait a second, like I was trying to compare it to a Web 2 thing, or Web 2 instance. And I think for a lot of people that are out there, anytime we're trying to like kind of reimagine something, I think one of our biggest mistakes is we drag our old school thinking into the new world without like allowing ourselves to kind of reimagine what's possible. And I think Top Shot for me, kind of going back into it the second time, was a kind of a big aha. I'm curious, you mentioned you kind of got into the creating side of it. You had already created a bunch in the fashion space, on growing a massive following on TikTok, but you also mentioned the burnout. Now,
Thank you.
I've like you have gone like through the all in on content, created a whole bunch of it, even long before Web3. And then kind of went through a burnout phase. Live video was kind of my thing for a long while. And then I kind of was like, I can't stand this. I don't even want to do it anymore. But there is something beautiful about like a new space kind of creating, with like almost like you get a do-over, but you get to learn from all of that. How was your initial kind of like content creation? Because I believe, if I did my research correct, you put your face on camera initially, right? So
Yeah,
let's face it, early 2021, there wasn't many of us that were putting our face on camera talking about NFTs. How did that like,
it's true.
did was there like okay, how am I going to avoid the burnout? Or like, hey, the burnout was the other way of creating it. This is a new space. Talk to me a little bit about your like kind of content creation mindset as you kind of jump back into creating content around, especially around NFTs in that time.
Yeah, I think starting fresh, and first of all, I was creating on a new medium, so it was like it wasn't TikTok, it was YouTube, and I had to kind of learn. I'd never done YouTube before, so it was just kind of fun because it was a new challenge, and also the content was different. So one thing I kind of took from TikTok was, well, first of all, I've always recorded and edited everything on my phone to date. I've never done anything on my computer, so I already had the skill of like knowing how to record. I had my ring light, but I remember the first video I posted because I was used to TikTok, and TikTok is very short form content that's fast, and you have to
Right.
be quick with things. And a lot of little, like a 15-second clip could have like 10 different pieces in it. So the first one I put out, I remember it was like a weekly update video of like, here's what happened in the week in NBA Top Shot, and I would kind of highlight this new thing came out, the founder tweeted this, like just kind of bite-sized news and like floor prices and stuff. And I went so fast because I was used to TikTok. So it was like, not only did I talk fast, but I also edited it where there was no like space in between. Everything was like freaking like just in your face, like, whoa, okay, like this girl is just going crazy. And I had some people being like, okay, it's really fast, but I kind of like it. But also, it's maybe you should slow it down. But also, I don't know, it was entertaining, and they like didn't know how to feel about it because it was like it was so different. And also, I think a lot of the content creators at the time, they were more like one and done, like one take, not super like highly edited and stuff. So it was just different. But I think that also attracted a lot of people because I put a lot of time into it, and I'm like, I'm going to put time into this. I'm going to make it really good. I'm going to be the best. If I'm going to do this, like I want to hit it out of the park, So, yeah, it was fun. Like just feeling like, I guess like dominating a new niche and like coming in and being like, let me, see what I can do here and just see where this goes. Cause I was actually kind of jobless at the time because I quit TikTok and I didn't have anything else lined up and I didn't exactly save any money. So I was like having to pay rent on my credit card and like I was like stressing out, but I'm like, okay, let me just at least do something that brings me joy. And then I started making the videos and they ended up leading to an opportunity. But it was like, yeah. And suddenly I didn't feel that burnout for content creation anymore. I think it was just, doing the same thing over and over again. I've always been a content creator at heart. And, sometimes it just takes switching up the content or just completely starting fresh and doing something new to kind of make you feel like you're ready to go again. And you want to start a new challenge for yourself.
I love that answer, and you actually answered partially what I was going to go with next, but I'm going to kind of double down on it. We did an episode last season with Shira Lazar. Shira and I have been really close friends since 2014. We actually been on, so we co-hosted a couple IBM as South by Southwest events way back then, and our whole episode was pretty much about content creator monetization and where that whole realm and world goes. But I think for a lot of people, I know a lot of our listeners are I mean, kudos to the listeners, anyone listeners to any of both of our podcasts at the moment, right? That if you're still here listening, right, you still have a passion. But I know a lot of people, they're trying to figure out like, what is my place in Web3? Like, where do I fit? And I think for some of us that have been content creators prior to Web3, it was more about like, what angle am I going to take? And then what am I going to leverage from before? And there's like something really fun about a brand new landscape. But I think a mistake a lot of people make, and I think in the Shira episode, we probably didn't cover this enough, and which is I think where you mentioned, I think was so perfect. You mentioned about, hey, I like really love this. I'm passionate. I also have like my own way of doing things. I'm curious if someone, is listening to this now and they're like, man, I haven't pressed the button. I haven't gone and created content, but I have a passion. I have something to say. What would be your advice for those that are kind of like at that spot right now, that kind of where you kind of just said, hey, you know what? I'm going to create this content and put it out with Web3, because you didn't do it with a idea of getting a job or monetizing. Because let's face it, TikTok and 700,000 followers. Yes, that can be monetized, but let's also face it, the monetization is extremely hard for any content creator. Anyone that doesn't understand that, like, I tip my hat to everyone. A lot of my career, I've been monetizing my content, and it's a rat race. Like, no one understands it until you're in it. But I'm curious, like you tapped in your passion, something you liked. It was a new space. What would you tell those that are kind of thinking about creating content in this space? What advice would you give to them?
That's a great question. And first of all, I mean, yeah, when I was first learning about crypto, I was not trying to create content at all. I was listening to a ton of podcasts. I was learning, and I think a lot of people are doing that too. And I think that's great. Like, it's great to just be kind of a listener or an observer and kind of figure out what's happening. But yeah, once you decide you want to start making content and you have value to provide, and you want to bring something to the table, yeah, I would say what I like to do when doing something new is like thinking about what works, like seeing what other people are doing and seeing what works, and then adding my own twist of what's different. And so, yeah, one of the more recent things I was doing was like I was doing like NFT update videos on Twitter, like short form, like 1 minute. And those did really well. I kind of recently stopped because it's the holidays, and I'm like, I can't really be doing these right now. But I was like noticing that people really liked, listening to podcasts or, kind of hearing about what's happening in the space. Like, there's a lot of Twitter spaces happening, but no one's really doing videos. And I was like, this is a good opportunity. So I think it's just thinking about what you want to do and then seeing where there's opportunities to do something new and carve a new path that nobody's really doing, or maybe there's only a couple people doing it, but you feel like you can do it a lot better. And also like just putting in the work and trying it out. And even if in the beginning you have to kind of pretend that people are going to watch, even if nobody does, and you have to like keep going even if you're like, oh man, only like one person commented. Like, you can't get discouraged. You just have to know that through time and consistency and like just making little improvements after every time, people will watch, like build and they will come, so like
Yep.
just keep doing it and people will eventually notice and be like, holy shit, this person's been doing this for this long and look at this. And they'll come to you, but it will take some time. It's not just going to be, it's not instant gratification always, where it's like, oh, put something out and you expect a bunch of people to to appreciate it and value it. It might take a little time, but yeah, just be willing to be patient and consistent.
So I'm curious, with that in mind, you mentioned evaluate. How did that kind of initial like discussion? Did they reach out to you? You reach out to them, and then how have you kind of managed kind of playing, kind of both worlds, right? You're content creator, NFT enthusiast, and then also working for a Web3 brand. Talk to me a little bit about that relationship and how that's kind of been since you kind of started there.
Yeah, so they reached out to me because I was using their site in my videos, and I would be like, in here you can see the chart of this, and so they were like, oh, we love your videos, and we're wondering if you want to work with us full time and help run the social side of things, and so yeah, I mean, I was like I said, I did not have a job at the time, so I was like, yes, definitely. And I also loved the tool. I was already using it. So it was just a great fit. And at the time, Evaluate was really just a tool for basically checking on your account value and analyzing like moments and seeing sales history and all that stuff, charts, all related to NBA Top Shot, which is what I was passionate about. So it just made
Nice.
sense. Yeah. And I've had, since my background was in social media, it just made sense. And then later got promoted to head of marketing, which is what what I am now. But it was just, and ever since the beginning too, I was like, I've always had kind of like a side hustle, like another thing that I've done in addition to my full-time thing. And can I still make these videos on YouTube and, have this creative freedom to do my own thing in addition to, helping you guys. And they were like, yeah, like, you can definitely have that freedom. And they've been very good about just being cool with me going to events and having my own podcasts, and I obviously had them on the show and everything, and it ties in, but yeah, they're super cool. And yeah, it's a lot of fun working at Evaluate too, and working for like a Web3 company. It's like it's a lot different, and it's also very like startup vibes, which I love because
Nice.
I feel like I have more power, more of a say in things, and it's just a lot more fun. Um, I mean, I've never really worked like a corporate job because I've been like I was serving a lot of my time when I wasn't being a content creator, so I'm like used to that. But um, but yeah, it's been
I'm
cool.
curious. One of the things I think it's real that's under talked about, but really I think it's something that we as content creators have to kind of be open about is like there is a juggle right now because you have like the things that you love. You have a Web3 company that you're working with. You have a podcast that you're creating. You're also creating your own content under Jenny from the blockchain. How do you kind of approach or manage that? Because I think having the right brand to work with is already like a huge win, which for any brand that's out there that's listening, like hire or go to work with your number one fans, like people that already love you and like already are using your tool. Like it's such a no brainer for like, if you think about it, but it doesn't happen enough, right? I think a lot of companies and tools, and I know some right now that have asked me for help for finding a new position. They hire a Web2 person that doesn't understand anything in Web3, yet I know they have a plethora of people here. But I'm curious, like, how do you juggle because there are some bad actors in our space that create content that is either pumping their own bags or is some backroom deal that they got that is the only reason they're talking about the project, right? And I think those days are those people, their times are numbered, right? They're getting probably more exposed, but it doesn't mean that some people might not accuse us or assume that we're only talking about something because of some relationship. How do you kind of handle that juggle? Because it's something that it weighs on me on a regular basis, and I know it's something that probably we don't talk about enough.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for me, I think so. The freedom of having your own podcast, your own show is like you truly get to decide what you want to talk about and what you want your show to be about. And, you don't really have to, like, you can set your own rules and your own, guide for how you want to operate it. For a long time, I didn't want to do sponsors. I just wanted to feel like I was having complete control of my podcast and everything that was talked about. And I don't know. I didn't want to monetize at first. I was very stubborn. I also didn't want guests for like several months. So I was
Me
like,
neither.
no
Me
guests.
neither.
Yeah.
I was the
And
same
it
as
was
you.
like,
There we go.
right. So I was like, no, I just wanted to be, me and my co-host Michael, and like that's it. And then you get used to a certain way of doing something, and then you decide, okay, let me build on that, let me do more. And I also think, with juggling everything too, like, okay, full-time Web3 job, podcast, making content, going to events, all this stuff, vlogging. It's like, I think, I remember this one phrase. I always think about this. It's better to have a lot on your plate than nothing on your plate at all. And so, it's, to me, I think once you kind of start doing something, you get into a groove of it and you get good at it. And then once you're comfortable, you can add more. Like you can, and then, once you add that other thing and then you're comfortable with it, you can add more. And you just keep adding more until you're like, okay, this is probably overwhelming and probably enough. No more adding things. And then things end up calming down and, whatever. But yeah, how you do anything is how you do everything. So,
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. And I'm very blessed. Like, you met Delphi Cat Allison beforehand. Me having a team that kind of helps me and say, hey, Brian, don't add that thing to your plate. Like, what are you dropping off? Right. Like because I've been very bad where I've not only run myself ragged. Right. But,
yeah.
and even for, our first season, we were, of course, doing daily, but in our first 60 episodes, 60 days, only 3 of them were interview shows. Right. And I think people don't recognize that back then because I was kind of like, well, I don't want to do, I was like, I don't want to do other people's calendars. B, I was like, I don't even know who to trust right now in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And those that I trust were projects and people that I already was, financially kind of, investing in. So then I was like, well, how do I provide this in like a transparent way where it doesn't just feel like a giant shill, right? So it was a balance there. Through the, bear market, right? Like I think not anyone, but for many of us, if we were lucky enough to start creating in the bull run, it gave us some like momentum. It gave us a little bit of like, man, these are the good old days, right? And I feel for those that started creating, let's just say March till now, right? Because there are a lot of, it's tough. Like, and I also, I've said this openly, our download numbers had gone down month over month for many months because we were riding the other high. Like we hit 1 million downloads so quickly that I was like, this podcast is insane, like the greatest thing I've ever done. And then all of a sudden from like 1 million to 1.5 million was a lot longer of a time period because all of a sudden, like, who wants to, listen or learn about this when either you've lost your bag, you've been rugged. It's a very interesting spot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, what keeps you motivated? Do you have like something that kind of keeps you on track or keeps you thinking about like, hey, this is why I'm doing it? What is your kind of like secret to keep you, not only motivated content creator, but motivated to still kind of believe in Web3 as a whole?
Ooh, that's a good one. You know what? First of all, shout out to my calendar. That honestly keeps me on track. If every week I set my calendar for the week. And I think honestly, it's people that are relying on you. Like it's like there's people that listen to the show. That there's I have my co-host, my producer. They're relying on me to show up. Twice a week and put in the work. And it's just I think I don't want to let people down. Like that's like a thing, I don't want to disappoint people. Yeah, sometimes I don't want to record a podcast. Sometimes I don't want to work. Sometimes I don't want to do things. But and it's always like whenever I go to events, that first day of vlogging, I'm always like, I don't want to vlog. And then, after that, it's like I just have to do it. Sometimes you have to force yourself to do things that you don't want to. It's not always going to be you're not always going to be motivated. Sometimes you just need to push through. But yeah, lean into the times when you are inspired and motivated. And then I try to just, as far as like, honestly, like the guests and things like that for the podcast, I guess it is biased. Like you can't really control that. Yeah, it's not going to be like completely decentralized where you feel like, oh, everyone has their fair say and can come on the show and talk about stuff. It is like you're vetting people are relying on you to bring people on that and trust. And so to your other point that you were talking about earlier. But anyway, yeah, honestly, what keeps me motivated is like people encouraging me and making me feel like they value what I'm doing. That's a huge thing. And then not wanting to like disappoint those people, I guess.
I love that because I think
Yeah.
that is like one of the magics, right? Because like I think imposter syndrome is often there because we're thinking about ourselves, right? And when we recognize that, like, no imposter ever thinks that they're an imposter, right? Like, breaking news for anyone that's out there, right? Imposters don't give a crap about what other people think about them, right? They are imposters, right? They're selling you unicorns, rainbows, and bullshit, right? Like, that's literally what we're there for. But I think it's also one of those things, like, when you're putting yourself out there, not for yourself, when you're recognizing, and that's when someone asked, like, what kept me going 365 days. There, it got to a point where I knew people would change their daily schedule to listen to my damn podcast. And I was like, who am I that, like, they changed their schedule for me? I better as well at least show up, right? Like, and that was like a big, aha, like, kind of switch for me. So I love that you kind of went down that way. I'm curious from one of the things I love when I was on your podcast, I think the beauty of this space, and Shira and Manushka and I talk about this on our Alpha Monday show that we do. We all three on that show come from, like, the projects that we want to mention. It's as if we are living in a different NFT world, right? Where I'm like, wait, that's the project you're paying attention to? Like, I haven't even heard of it, right? And I think there's like some of that. There's something beautiful about, like, you can get kind of obsessed or enthralled in one project that'll expose you to some other projects. But in many cases, if someone didn't come in that same kind of pathway for them, they're going to look at things a little bit differently. So I'm curious, like, how are you evaluating projects right now, like, as a whole, and maybe not even for your own bag, but even how you're thinking about talking about projects on the podcast or content you're creating? Because for people that don't realize that, like, as content creators, we have to think about all of that kind of encompassing, right? Because for me, that's a big concern of mine, is that if I talk a little bit more about a project over another project, that project better at least stand the weight of what I'm talking about, right? And we all probably have made mistakes. Someone can go back and listen to a couple episodes I had in January, a couple of projects that I loved in January. They didn't make it through the bear market. Like, they were done in June, and I didn't see that coming. But hey, that's kind of the life we live. How are you looking at projects now, like the ones that you kind of love to talk about, and then kind of like what are the things you're looking for projects kind of in the new year, kind of moving forward?
Yeah. So for me, I'm definitely like a big holder. Like, I'm not much of a trader or a seller. So whenever I've talked about projects on the podcast, it's more of like, I really like this, but I'm not like saying that I think it's gonna like be valuable. Like, in fact, it could probably go to zero. Like, I just, this is just what I like. And um but yeah, like, Michael and I were very different. He's more like, oh, I think this will 10x, and like he has that trader mentality, whereas I have more of the holder. And sometimes I'll buy something. He's like, oh yeah, I think that'll do well. That'll double. I'm like, honestly, I don't know. Maybe it won't. Like, I don't want to say that I think it would, but it's something that I'm interested in. And yeah, and it definitely is kind of awkward when it's like, some of the previous maybe interviews where you've given smaller projects a chance and then they don't do well, and you're like, oh man, like, hopefully people didn't buy it, and then feel bad. Which is why it's always like, you kind of, I don't know, for me it's like the mentality of buy what you love, and don't expect it to appreciate in value. But yeah, it is hard. And then as far as like, what do we talk about on the pod, like how to choose what projects to talk about, honestly, we do try to kind of focus on like the popular ones, and kind of like, okay, what is getting a lot of attention, and just kind of mentioning, oh, here are the big things that are happening, like here's what some of the big projects are doing right now. But yeah, it is hard to kind of keep up with too many projects, though. Michael's kind of the one in charge of the topics. I'm more like the interviews, when we do the interviews and stuff. But yeah, but the good thing is there's no shortage of news to come out with every week. Like, there's always stuff happening, and that's also great for content creation. It's like there's always stuff happening in the space to talk about.
Yeah, I love that. It's like one of the questions I get all the time that I always laugh, because they're like, well, how do you come up with something to talk about? I'm like, have you been in Web3? I mean, you and I talked about on your pod Sunday night. So we're recording this on a Tuesday for those that are playing at home. I don't know who's playing at home or cares to play at home. But like Sunday night, we were talking about the Trump NFTs and like the ridiculous how they climbed so quickly, and it was 45,000 of them. Well, since Sunday night to our Tuesday recording, the price has retracted 86%. Now, for anyone that's been playing in this market, it's been every NFT. Like, there has not been an NFT that I can remember as of recently, let's just say the last 4 months, that hasn't, even the ones that like rose, that like the fall is going to happen. And it used to be the fall, like after art reveal, and like a lot of things were predictable. I think now it's a little bit even less predictable about when the fall is going to happen, because I would have thought the Trump NFTs, when they hit like 0.4 and they retracted a little bit, I was like, okay, that was their high. And then within 24 hours of that, they went all the way up to 0.75. And I was like, holy hell. And I got a message actually after the episode that we did together that someone messaged me, and he was like, Brian, I just spent 14 grand on Trump NFTs. And I was like, I mean, it was like, it blew my mind. And like, granted, most of it was, he minted them. And I will, leave that part out of the equation. But like, even in the 2 days since you and I had that great conversation, there's been an 80% retrace. Now, that's a whole topic for content, because like, why? Like, what is the reasoning? What is the percentage of the projects they're doing? Now, there's so many fun kind of components that we can kind of play into that. And so I think that's such an important thing for people that are out there, is like, once you start getting in and you start, when you have to record and you're playing in the space, the topics are there. Like, that's never been a shortcoming of mine. I don't even have to worry about that. But I do have to ask the question. Now, I'm very, I am a girl dad. I have 3 daughters. I am very bullish on many female-led projects, female-led female PFPs. We have, some great new co-hosts coming on our podcast now for season 2. And I will say, like, one of the things I took pride in was that, we interviewed more females on the podcast in season 1 than I did males. And part of that was 100% an effort, right? Because I believed in that conversation. But as a female content creator in the space, as a female in the space, as a leader in Top Shot's like OG, right? Like, there's like layers of OG, and I look at anyone that even like realized that Top Shot was there in 2020, like that is, OG in my mind. Q, give us a little perspective. How has it been for you as a female content creator, as a female in the space? Because I'm very blessed. I know that we have a very large female audience of the podcast, but I also know a lot of them are holding maybe 1 or 2 or 3 NFTs based on, some surveys and stuff that we did. And I think for me, it's easy for me to talk about advocacy and allyship and doing what I can. But I think it's more important to hear from like those that are in the space, that are kind of, we had Board Becky on the show, was I think the second guest we ever had. And I told her I want to bring her back now. She's post-child, has a whole new realm on that side. But talk to me about your experience, as a female content creator and a female in this kind of Web3 arena.
Yeah, first of all, major props to you for like consciously deciding to have, more females than males, or like, at least kind of trying to keep it even. I do that on my podcast as well. I like it to be equal. So I like to do 50-50, where it's like all of our interviews, we try to do every other week, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way. But, we basically try to keep it equal. And sometimes it is like a little bit more difficult because there's a little bit more guys in the space. And so you kind of got to really, research and seek out, and find the people you want to bring on. But it's super rewarding to me, just like internally, to do that, because I just feel like I'm helping push the narrative that there are a lot of women in this space, doing amazing things. And I think that's very inspiring. Like, the reason I even started making videos in the NFT space was because I used to watch this lady, Crypto Casey, on YouTube, and she's super freaking smart. And I'm just like, she's amazing. And I was like watching her, and I'm like, damn, like this is great. Like this is such like there weren't many like female like crypto content creators on YouTube that I was watching, and they were kind of hard to seek out and find. And so just the fact that she was just doing that like was just very inspiring to me. And I'm like, if she can do it, I can do it, and I think sometimes you need to see someone else that, is kind of like you, that you feel like, oh, right, well, that person's doing it, I can easily do that too. And so that sometimes that's all it takes, is just kind of seeing someone that inspires you. But yeah, honestly, it's been great. I've had nothing but great experiences in this space, and guys have really been awesome in this space, very supportive. And yeah, people have been really kind. sometimes you hear horror stories and that can kind of deter you, but I think for the most part, people are mostly good. And it's always like the extreme, stories and stuff that stand out to people. And then they think that that happens to everyone and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I would encourage, any ladies listening to, to if you're really wanting to get into NFTs, you gotta you gotta like just try them out and buy them, because even if you think you'll lose money on them, it's a good experience, even just buying and the process of buying and doing and like taking action. Yeah, for me, when I was learning about crypto, I was learning for so long before I actually put money into crypto, like because I was scared. I was like, I feel like I need to know as much as I can before I put money in, which is fine. But also, sometimes you don't want to wait too long. Like you just, what is it? Immersive learning, where you learn by doing. Like that's a
Oh,
huge
yeah.
thing. And I know that women can be sometimes a little more like risk averse than guys. So yeah, just tapping into it and just realizing that you can kind of do whatever you want in this space, and you don't have to let things limit you if you don't feel super welcome. Just make your own lane and go out there and do
I love
stuff.
that. I love that. And we preach here on the podcast, like, be a collector before you're a creator. And part of that is just like being a collector in this space opens so many like aha moments and things you start to just like recognize. And, I think for everyone listening too, like, we need everyone and everyone's skill set, right? This space is not only so young, but it's even shrunk over the, recent time. No matter what your background is, no matter what your experience is, no matter what, even like what are some of the things you want to become, I think there's a place for everybody right now. And I don't want to be like the, overly, positive, optimistic guy here, but like I know that there's like, some big gaps there. So I appreciate you, kind of sharing, that point of view. I am curious, you mentioned, kind of like that fear sometimes of getting in. There's also like that fear or the need for perfectionism, right? The idea that I either have to be the smartest person on the room, smartest person on the Twitter space, maybe the one that is providing the content. And you mentioned about being someone that's doing a lot of editing, right? And I for one, like, live content has been my bread and butter, mainly just because like I do have a little bit of that. When as soon as I start editing, I go down and like start editing for 8 hours on a video that didn't need 8 hours of editing, right? Because all of a sudden it like clicks a switch and I feel like I have to like get rid of every and I have to change every silent mark. And but then like for me, I kind of found live to be my avenue there. How do you kind of address perfectionism maybe for yourself, or like how does that kind of manifest itself in what you're doing on kind of a day-to-day basis?
That's a great question. And I recently took a painting class, and something that the teacher kept saying that stood out to me, that I feel like answers your question and is like what I do, is, first of all, she kept saying, because it was like one of those step by step ones, first, okay, let's all paint the moon together, then we paint the mountain. And she kept saying, stop when you're 75% happy. Stop when you're 75% happy.
Ooh, I like
Because
that.
because she's like, you could keep painting over and trying to make it perfect, but it's never gonna. And she said, like, artists don't finish a painting, they just like basically like abandon it. Like they decide when they want to be done, but you're never fully finished. And so I'm like, yeah, I like that, because I feel like I do that too when I'm editing. I'm like, okay, this isn't perfect and I know I can make it a lot better, but it's good enough. And that to me is like, yeah, a lot of people will get caught up in, oh no, but it has to be really good. And just start out doing the bare minimum. Like that's what I would say. Do the bare minimum. Once it's good enough, then that's good. That's good. It doesn't need to be perfect, but as long as it's good enough,
I
stop when
love
you're
that.
75% happy.
I like that saying. And for our listeners, they're very familiar. Like, my AI art journey has all happened in the last 6 months, and I never consider myself an artist, and I've now sold out multiple collections as an AI artist. And a lot of it is like I have to figure out how to be an artist. Like for me, like perfectionism wasn't really ever really a problem. Mostly just because I've been very good at showing up as myself, and like I just that's been my natural. In the art side, not the case. Like once all of a sudden I started selling the AI art as NFTs, all of a sudden I went to this space where I was like, why did I just spend 11 hours on that piece versus like before? And like when you said 75% done, like I have a new rule now when like I know that when I've almost done 100 kind of upscales or changes to one piece, I put that piece aside. I either walk away from creating it completely or I put the piece aside and I'll revisit it. And the art piece that actually dropped yesterday, the day before we're recording, was actually one of the pieces that I finished, quote unquote finished. I finished editing it because I was just like, I'm done with it for now. 3 weeks ago. And when I was looking to drop one and I was going through my catalog, I'm like, oh my gosh, that piece gives it shares the emotion and the story exactly the way that I wanted it. But I remember that day I was so frustrated with that piece that I was like, it's never gonna be complete. I'm never gonna put this one out to the world. And so I love that you kind of connected that dots because it hit me in the feels there. I like that. Stop when you're 75% happy. So I appreciate you jumping on the show. We've had you for about 45 minutes or so. As we kind of wrap, I'm curious, like what are you like either predictions, things you're most excited about in 2023 as we kind of go into this new year? I feel like 2021 was like a hot mess of like, you could sneeze out an NFT project and it sold out. We were all over the map. 2022, I think many of us assumed it would have continued, but I think it was probably one of the, the harder years for so many of us. What are your thoughts in 2023? And, leave us with kind of your maybe predictions or, future outlook.
I think 2023, we're probably still going to be in a bear market. And I think, but the beauty of the bear is that the pace is slower. So I felt very overwhelmed, very like stressed out, and like things were hectic and chaotic for me during the bull market. Now I feel like relieved, honestly, because I'm like, I can still continue to build, but with less pressure, and things aren't happening as fast. And it's kind of nice working at, not feeling like you have to like rush things. And you can kind of take your time a bit. I think the bear is a great time to build and kind of develop a skill or learn something new, or you kind of have more time during a bear market. So maybe instead of focusing on trading or buying NFTs, maybe you're figuring out some other way that you want to contribute to the space or what you want to learn, or maybe you want to work in Web3 and this is a great time to learn a new skill, or to get a job and whatever. Yeah, and one of the things at Evaluate that we recently launched was like a live trading tool, which is basically like I can trade my doodle for your Bored Ape and we can just swap them easily. And I think a lot of people are kind of buying less, but still wanting to have fun in the bear market doing things. And so yeah, if you can figure out things to do that maybe you're like, okay, I don't want to spend any more money, that don't cost money, but just being here and being aware of what's going on, and keeping your ears peeled and working on what you want to do in this space and building, whether that's putting out content or maybe you're actually learning a new skill, being a dev, I don't know. This is a great time. The bear market is awesome. I think, besides the monetary aspect, it's a pretty great time to just relax and feel more sense of community, because a lot of people have already left.
So true and so well said. And I will say, Evaluate, I wasn't as familiar with it until I was starting diving into your background, and I love the trading component. Love there's a chat window there. Love I've gone through so many. I've been the third party in so many NFT trades. Like, I haven't done a lot of trades myself individually, but because I'm doxxed, because I have a persona and I have a reputation, people assume like, okay, well, Brian, can you facilitate this trade? Which I have, and I kind of taken that as a role, but it's also like for so many people, they don't have that. And I will tell you, it's a nerve wracking, like, I mean, one that I did a couple months back, I remember being like, I can't believe like those two NFTs just went into my wallet. Right. And now I'm, being the one that's kind of swapping these around. And I was like, I would prefer if it wasn't me. So I love that the tool is out there. We'll put a link in the bio and in the show notes for those to check it out. I really like whole setup of Evaluate. So I definitely recommend people check it out. I'm always looking for new tools, for new ways for us to approach different things. So we'll definitely have the audience check that out as well. And so yeah, Jenny, thanks so much for coming on the show, for joining us on this conversation. And we'll plug the podcast out there. I was on the Sunday episode,
yes, listen to the Sunday one.
Yes, and I tell you what, in this space, a lot of kudos go to podcasters, creators, founders that are willing to collaborate. Right, I tip my hat. Like I really love that we can come together, recognize that this is not a zero sum game, and that together we can all rise. Right, and getting all those comments from people being like, hey, my two favorite podcasts came together. Like that's what this is all about, right? Like that, and I love that you're on the show. Excited to put that out there to the world, and for our listeners too. One of the things that we talk a lot about is like, just go back and listen to me in the AI art journey. Go back and listen, to what Jenny shared on her journey, back into content creating in Web3 and Top Shots, right? Like there isn't like one way to do something. And for most of it, we're just kind of figuring it out as we go. And then we're leaning into what works. Like there's not like a magic recipe that we're like, hey, we know if we do this, because, if there was a magic recipe, let's face it, there's a lot of people in this space that would probably already have taken that up on that. So I hope this episode inspires people to press the damn button. Of course, you need to do your own damn research, as we like to preach here. But at the same time, the space is ripe right now for content creation, for diving in, for being involved in tools and companies and projects. So until next time, my friends, make it a great day. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.